All right, gents. Beer flu. It's got me stuck inside. So instead of wheeling, it's time to do a little EFI swap. I yanked the EFI out of the cheap Finder a couple months ago. Time to slap it in this bitch. But reason I'm keeping this motor, I got some gnarly cams in this. It's pretty fresh rebuild on the bottom end of this thing. It's worth swapping all the top end instead of just throwing the whole motor in. So time to yank this thing apart, and we're gonna do a EFI swap on a 1987 Nissan Pathfinder. Should be good for 20 horsepower, 35, 40 foot-pounds of torque. But more important, I will be able to get it tuned after that. And with the gnarly cams in here, hopefully I can get more like 50 foot-pounds of torque and 35 horsepower. So let's get to it and yank all the top end of this greasy old motor off. If you're hoping for the super step-by-step detailed video on how to do an EFI swap, this is not it, because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. So probably a lot of my information is going to be wrong. And also, you don't want me to film all that crap. Just figure it out. First step, because I am a super janky wirer and I use short scraps of wire all the time and stuff, I have wonderful things like this is to my E fan, and my yellow wire turns into a stripy wire. And so the secret to wiring, figuring this all out later, is just numbering everything direct across. Doesn't matter what it is, and it will help me when I have to toss my harness back in. As you can see, super regretting already that I did not pressure wash down the engine before I started this, because it's saucy. Also, those of you who know wiring, how do you like them apples? I guess I should be looking in here a little more often. Well, I don't have to anymore. That's greasy. K&Ns are terrible. Hate them. He says as he has one in his rig. Oh, I already cut myself, leaked everywhere. So I'm pulling all the intake stuff off, the valve covers off, and 100% of the wiring. Gonna try to figure out how to get the stuff from the 95 cheap Finder back onto this thing. Probably completely rethink my air compressor, because the intake is gonna be over here. So I might have to put my air compressor over here, but right now that's the least of my worries. Just got to yank it out of there. I'm gonna figure this out as we go, because I've done literally no research on this. It's not really my style. So we're just going to continue taking stuff off the top until I run out of things to take off. So we're winning. TBI, the carb essentially, just came right off. I had to cut a couple inches out of an extension so I had the right length. But now I can fit this in here without having to take my fan out. I think I got enough of the bolts off that I can pop this whole intake out. Okay, can't do it with my holding the camera, but I pop that bad boy out of there. I have the entire old intake manifold off, almost ready to throw the new intake on. So I'm just working on yanking all of the wiring out, because I have to swap the wiring harness and the ECU. Bunch of you guys have asked before. I got my ECU up out of the way, and you can see there's a couple little brackets there, but if you unbolt this plate, which is right behind your glove box, and I just have a little bracket in there, and the ECU sits right there, which keeps it right up and out of the water, which gives you an extra good foot. Also gets the wiring out of the way. I gotta unbolt this dash, which if you've ever done before, it's a huge pain in the ass. There's so many bolts and there's so many hidden bolts. Well, I'm a good probably 2 hours into pulling this dash apart. As you can see, super organized the way I keep everything. Okay, so had to take the steering wheel off, gauge cluster out, found all the freaking bolts. And then, of course, I was still struggling to get it out. Well, why? Because when I put my windshield in, I goobed a whole bunch of mastic extra, and it glued the top of my dash to the window. So that was no fun. But it's pretty much out now. I still got something holding over here. Oh, it looks like I ripped up my fuel gauge. Feel sorry for anybody who has to do that, because that's no fun. And now I get to yank all the heating out, and I'm starting to wonder how much of this stuff I'm ever actually going to put back in my rig. Well, good thing I checked in my blower motor. There's a couple of big old pine cones in there. Heat's overrated anyways. Typical me fashion, turning a one-day project into a multiple-week project. But anyways, back out in the shop this morning. Going to snake the rest of this wiring out and then turn around and stick the wiring harness from the 95 right back in the same hole. Fab myself up a new hat. Had to try out a red one, and there's only one red hat you can have these days. Starts over here, runs across. It just fed the entire thing down through this hole. Next up, I gotta push all of this through that hole, which then gets all of this out, and getting there. Oh, what a drag. Just got the old wiring harness out, and it's time to begin snaking this new wiring harness into my old rig. I labeled not very many things, so it should be a hell of a lot of fun. Probably should have made sure it was all free before I lugged it in here, but never been accused of being the smartest. Ugh, I hate wiring. It's brutal. And plugging everything in, hitting a lot of connectors that don't match up. I've got a lot of emission stuff off this thing, and it's got no AC. It's pretty stripped down, so a good bunch of those plugs are from that. It's always nice popping your valve cover off after 11 years of it being rebuilt and it looking that minty inside. How gorgeous that looks. I'm sludging that girl. So I swapped over the valve covers because they got different vents on the EFI valve covers. They've also got different clips on them. So swap them over. Swap the intake manifold. So we got the intake bolted up, and this right here is what it's all about. This is the fuel injectors my dreams are made of. Okay, well, we're learning as we go here. So there's a couple of bolts that stick up on the intake that clearly don't matter when you've got a TBI intake. They're studs that come out of the block, and well, they hit the fuel rail. So this fuel rail won't sit down in there, which means I probably have to take this whole intake back off and get the angle grinder in there and cut those things down. They're a lot longer than they need to be. You can see them right there. The this one and this one. Since this is a learn as you go show, I have the intake manifold back off, as you can see. We learned a few things here as we're going. Looks like I forgot to put the NOx sensor under there. Probably doing shit wrong, but who knows. The other bonus with taking it off is I realized I had this gasket on there twice because it was already on there, and I tossed another one on top. So far going backwards is worth it. No wonder I'm a terrible mechanic. One step forward, two steps back. All right, here in half-ass garage, we've cut the studs down now. I'm going to hit this with a quick vacuum, try to suck up as much of this grinder shum as possible, and then we're going to slap that intake back on there. I've also found that the casting on this old engine does not have a spot for the NOx sensor, so I can't bolt it to the block down there. I'm going to bolt it to the underside of the intake manifold. Toss that intake back on and see if I cut enough off these bolts, or I'm going to be mad. We're continuing to learn things as I go along here. I got my fuel rails on. They are all mint. But in the process, I'm realizing that my upper rad hose is awfully tight. The new one looks like this, or the 95 one. So I get to pull the fuel rails back off again and remove that. Hopefully I don't have to take the entire intake back off, but I just might have to, which would be the 4th or 5th time now. Stuff hooked up. Fuel lines hooked up. Some of the electrical hooked up. Got this in. Threw my timing cover back on. I didn't even need to take it off. I need to put the distributor back in, but I'll just do it by hand because there is a mark right there. Of course, it's hard to get to the crank bolt with the rad and the E-fan in the way, but thankfully, it's probably time to swap my rad because I broke the upper rad outlet inlet like 5 years ago, and there was just enough width for a hose clamp, so I just been rocking it like that. But I got a mint rad right here. Oh, looks good. Looks real good. Oh, and it looks like I'm going the wrong way because every time I click the camera on, I've got more parts off of my engine, but ain't that the way it goes? That looks really bent. One of the reasons I'm in the shop today instead of doing yard work is because it's pissing rain out there. So, as we like to say, do not enter unless you have huge tits. My buddy Nate wrote that on there in 1995, 1996. So, vintage. As always, we're making things up on the fly here. And what this is the knock sensor. We're going to give it a try. I think I'm going to put it on the underside right here. It'll still do what it needs to do, or at least not read an error. But we'll find that out. I'll keep you posted on that one. And of course, I need to find myself a bigger bolt. So, time to go digging in the old bolt bin. Woo! Today's going to be a good day, boys. I do believe that'll be long enough. Go away. Oh, yeah! So, we'll give that a try. Time to slap the gasket on this thing. Bolt this thing in. I should also note that I have lost 2 3/8 ratchets somewhere. I've looked all over my goddamn shop. I don't know where either of my 3/8 ratchets are. You know how that goes, eh? Of course, I also started running the bolts in on the intake and then realized that I probably have to put the distributor in first. Unbolt of the intake number 1, and we'll drop this bad boy in. If you haven't put a distributor in before, keep in mind, I'm not a mechanic. So the motor's on top dead center right now. You can do it a few different ways. Google that shit. I'm not going to explain it. Now I'm going to drop the distributor in. Thankfully, my nice distributor cap from Bosch has the numbers on it. So I'm going to point the rotor right at number 1, and then I'm going to drop it in, and that puts the firing order in the correct order, and I have a new rotor for it as well, and should be good. So I also have to remember to put that spacer and distributor spacer, drop this thing in, and then we'll get this intake blenum back on. I put a mark on the distributor with a felt, so once I get it close, I don't have to worry about it spinning out and grabbing the cap and trying to figure out where number 1 is again. That'll just help me a bit once I drop this thing in. You learn these things by doing it the wrong way and the hard way too many times. Bolt up, round 2. Hopefully, it'll be the last time we're running the bolts in, but you know me. I'd be surprised if it was. So I'm just making a plate for the capping off the EGR holes inside of the intake because I want nothing to do with EGR. And it's always easier to drill your holes before you cut a piece of steel. So now I'm not working with a tiny little piece. So now I'll step it up to a bigger hole, bigger drill bit, buzz it out, bolt it on. Perfect. EGR plate, got a little piece of gasket. And we're gonna bolt it right on there. Mint. So another thing I should have done while I had the intake off was swap the throttle cable, which I didn't do. So working it out now. And the one for the EFI is longer. So I'm going to pop it in instead of this stumpy little TBI one. This is the wiring harness that came off the 87 Pathfinder alternator. I had to cut the ends off because I am running a 170 amp Chevy alt in my rig. Well, since I love showing myself being a complete moron and also a slob, I loosened off the bolt on my alternator, and this nut came loose, meaning I had to pull the whole alt and take the alternator apart. And then of course when I slide out the center section, the brush has popped out. So now I got to figure all this out, and an hour of messing around later, hopefully I will have the alt back in, and then I can actually do what I need to do from the start. Being a shitty mechanic sometimes really sucks. Story of my life. Another round of shrink wrap, so electrical tape will do. This is how you hook up 3-wire Chevy alt. Power to the bat. The big white wire goes to the field wire, and the yellow wire goes to the return. Not return. I don't know what the R is. Either way, I'm going to throw this thing back in. Get back to where I was an hour ago. Once I kind of run out of things that I can easily plug together, I'm going to jump in and start working on the dash. Plugged in everything I could. I'm going to clean up some more of this extra crap wiring that I don't need anymore. I already pulled some stuff out. That's speaker wire and door wire and stuff like that. What a pain in the ass. Sure hope it runs. I hate wiring. Ugh. I want to use my square dash. I like it. I like the look of it. It also all bolts up. And so we're putting it back in. I'm going to throw the gauge pod in this thing though, just to make it easier. Because this plug is completely different than the 87 one. I started getting it in there, had the wires through here, and realized the wires are going to be too short if they go through there. I just hole sawed a couple holes through there, plugs through this side, because they're not very long, and they have to get plugged in down there. So, we'll see. It's going to look a little hack, but it's about the way she goes around here. So we're going to keep running bolts in. My pile of hardware, my extremely well organized pile of hardware, is much smaller than it was. Seats are getting nice and grubby. The other thing that I've been ignoring, but I'm going to have to get to, is I got to pop the old O2 sensor out, weld up the bung, well, run a bolt in there, tack it in, and then I have to weld in a new O2 sensor that's a different size thread. I also have to cap off the old EGR tube that's on my headers, and of course I couldn't get that out, and I ignored it, and now it's underneath the intake and way harder to get to, and I'm gonna have to do everything from below with dirt dripping in my eyes. So typical 1 step forward, 2 steps back here at Pathmaker Speed Shop, but let's continue with the Pathmaker EFI swap, and we'll see if we can get this thing purring at one point today. The O2 sensor for the 87, the TBI motor, has I believe that's an M12 thread size, and of course, because it's Nissan, the EFI one's got a different one, and it's 18 mil thread size. Entire exhaust out. I guess the Y pipe's still in, but here's the old O2 sensor. So I'm gonna find a bolt, cut it short, run it in, weld it up, and then I gotta drill a new hole here, and I need a 18 mil bung. Perfect. So I'm just gonna burn this in right here, drill a hole right there for the new O2 sensor, weld that nut in, get it back in the rig. Success. Went to the store, got a pile of crap in my messiest, smallest shop ever. That's right, I'm a slob. Deal with it. Let's get this welded on, then I can get the exhaust back in. Now I can bolt the exhaust back into this thing. It's gonna be good, boys. Boys, we're winning. Doesn't want to fire. I don't know why. All we get is a click-de-click, but she's all there. So we're gonna have to figure out some wiring here. What's going on? Not sure yet. Gonna give her a go here. Woo! 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 I don't know what's going to happen if I keep cranking it over. I don't really want to yet. I'm not quite at that point because of my leaky upper rad hose. And I have no idea how my timing is. But holy shit, boys. She's going to cheech. Oh, we have exciting news. Listen for it. Fuel pump. She'll fire, boys. Only problem is, I'm still missing that gasket. So I'm not going to fire it. Damn it! More time has gone by on the never-ending project. But hopefully we should get it to fire up here shortly. This was what we've been waiting for. The gasket for the upper rad hose where it attaches to the intake manifold. So hopefully I don't have to pull the whole plenum and fuel rails and everything off again. I'm hoping I can just sneak this in behind there, but we're gonna figure it out. Because of course, it's the gasket that goes on this, back in there. So it's gonna be a drag, but as you can see, there's a lot of stuff that's gonna have to come off if I wanna get real good access to this. So we'll see if we can get it in there. And as soon as we do and get it tightened up, put some coolant in, and we're gonna see if we can flash it up. I got my gasket in. That was not very easy, but got her in without taking off a whole bunch of stuff on the front, which is wicked. So I am gonna see if she fires. And this is literally the first turn of the key. So fingers crossed. You think she's gonna fire? Oh, I'm excited. We're gonna see. Is she gonna run? Battery on. Oh. Ooh. That wasn't so good. Don't like that too much. Well, after talking about top dead center, I didn't have my rig at top dead center when I just tried to fire it, which is the problem. Round 2, attempt number 2. I had my distributor 180 off, was on exhaust stroke, not on compression stroke. So should be good now. We're gonna see. Attempt number 2 at flashing this bad boy up. Nope. Still not happy at all. Round 3. Ooh, she's close. I'm not gonna lie. Confidence is low. I think this is try 4. Oh, she's gonna run. Oh shit. Just gotta get that timing working. Whew. Smoked us out a bit in here. It's real close. I need to work on some timing and a couple things, but she's pretty much ready to fire here. Really wants to run. Winner. Woo! Smoky in here now. Before I forget, got to give a huge thank you to my buddy Mike for all the tech support via text message. Literally could not have done it without you, Mike. All the help was hugely valuable, and I owe you big time now. So cheers, buddy. thank you so much. You're the man. I gotta get this thing buttoned all up, but you don't really need to see that. Got some tuning to do, some fine tuning, but I could sign off here because you guys are probably bored of watching my ass. So hopefully we'll have it back out on the trail real soon. And there's only one real thing left on the list, and that's for my good buddy Peg over at Zip Ties and Bias Supplies. If you're not watching that shit, you should. He's fucking hilarious. But Peg, buddy, this red line's for you.